How's it going, everyone? This is Draoi with another damn level. Today we're going to be looking at a Necro build that I use in both PvE and PvP. It's not too complicated. It is a power well build, which they've been out for quite a long time, but I enjoy playing it, and it's quite a lot of fun, regardless of what you're doing, where you're at, or really who you're playing with. The goal of this build for me was to make myself very hard to kill, but at the same time still having the ability to deal enough damage to where I could actually take someone in a one-on-one, when taking a point in PvP or kind of holding down all the mobs during an event. So we're going to take a look at traits. It's 4, 4, 0, 6, and 0. So that's 4 in Spite, 4 in Curses, 6 in Blood Magic. We're going to take a look at Spite, just go down the list. First trait we take is in Spite. When you kill a foe, remove 3 conditions. It's pretty self-explanatory, it's pretty easy. Works great in PvE, because you can kill some of the tiny mobs to get some of those killer conditions off you, especially with the Mordremoth mobs and things like that. And then PvP, whenever someone is taken out, it's not quite as often. It does have a 10-second internal cooldown, so it won't be happening like all the time, but it's enough to make a difference that I found inside PvP. Second trait is Axe Training. This is a Axe Warhorn and then Dagger Warhorn build. So we take the Axe Training for 10% more damage on our axe, and it reduces the cooldowns of the axe skills by 20%. Again, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to follow. The trait line itself, Spite, gives us 200 power and 200 condition duration. Now this isn't a condition-centric build, however the condition duration will help us a lot with keeping people inside of our wells, with things like Unholy Feast, which gives out 6 seconds worth of cripple. Next is Curses. Curses gives us 200 precision and 200 condition damage. We're not too worried about the condition damage, but we do want that precision. This is a somewhat crit-centric build on top of the wells, which we'll see when we get to Blood Magic. So Focused Rituals is the first trait we take inside Curses, which allows us to use ground targeting for our wells, which means we can place them where we need them instead of right around us at any given time. This allows you to kind of guide battles in PvP, because you can throw down wells to prevent or to deter people from going that particular way. And you can throw down the boon stripping ones in a big group fight in PvP to kind of strip all the buffs that the opposing guardian is putting on everyone. So it works really nice for that. Banshee's Wail. Since we use Warhorn, we take this because it makes the skills for the Warhorn last 50% longer, which we're always for, and that'll be really important when we get to Locust Swarm. It also reduces the recharge by 20%, just like the Axe Training does. So again, more use out of our weapons. Always a good thing. Last trait line is Blood Magic. So it gives us Vitality, which is HP, because again the goal of this build for me was to be able to take a serious amount of punishment and really bunker down those points. And then Healing Power, which obviously just goes to bunkering. Like, you can sit there and take a beating and then use your heal skill, and it heals for quite a lot more. Now the way Healing Power works is it takes the base heal value of whatever the skill is and just adds your healing power to it. So 300 isn't actually that much, but it helps, because it helps significantly when giving out regen. So the first trait inside here is Bloodthirst. Siphoning health is more effective. Now we take this because we have a dagger which hits the 2 skill, the Life Siphon, hits 9 times for 2000 damage. Now that's before obviously armor reduction, but heals you for 403 every pulse. and that goes down quite a lot if you don't have the bloodthirst, because it increases it by 20% the amount that it siphons off, which is always really nice. And this is what gives us a little bit of sustain. This allows you to stay in the melee fight with some of the heavy hitting warriors and everything, and have more sustain than they do for life. A minor trait worth mentioning here is the vampiric, is you siphon health whenever you hit a foe as well. It's not a whole lot, but it's still enough to keep you up in some cases. Especially part of this build, the key to this build is being able to attack a lot without having to put tons of effort in. So like you can keep hitting one, and then after you pop the Locust Swarm, that's 15 hits for 15 seconds to everything around you. So it's really key to having things like Locust Swarm up, because that's what's going to get you your crits and your constant life siphon. So the primary trait, which is Ritual Mastery, which reduces the cooldown of all of our wells by 20%. Some of these wells have a long cooldown, so that 20% cooldown reduction is more than welcome. Vampiric Precision. So siphon health whenever you critically hit. So with everything we've taken here, what occurs is every time we critically hit, we'll get 52 health on top of 41 health, because a critical hit will trigger both Vampiric and Vampiric Precision. And that's where the sustainability of this build comes out quite a lot, because it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you're hitting 30 times inside of this 15-second time frame, that's a lot of hits. And with this particular gear set that I have a 33% chance to critical hit. You can gain quite a lot of health off that. And you can go full glass cannon with this build with the gear if you really want. You'll lose a lot of health, but you can do it and go for full sustain, minimal health, but all the lifesteal. That wasn't the goal of this build, but you certainly can. So those are the traits and kind of how those work. We can take a look at some of the skills and kind of how those function together. So our utility skills here, the Well of Power, this is your stun break, so you have to be careful when you use this because you've only got one stun break with this build. But what it does is once you put it down, is it pulses 5 times, and each time it pulses it converts a condition on you or your allies up to 5 targets into a boon, which is exceptional if you're going up against a condition Necro or a condition NG. The Well of Corruption is a damage dealing field, but it does the opposite of the Well of Power. It converts all the boons on your enemies into conditions, which is great against Guardians, which can do ridiculous damage through some of their boon stacking, and this will cut those stacks down and get rid of them and turn them into detrimental effects for you. It also pulses 6 times, so it's 6 total conditions, and it hits up to 5 targets. So you have a lot of battlefield control, because with our traits you have the ability to place those where you find appropriate, so you can zone out the back lines in PvP really easily. In PvE, you use them really just you throw them down on top of your tank, whoever is tanking at the time, which could be you, it could be a warrior. I've seen some successful elementalists take all the damage to the face. That's totally fine. Whoever is tanking at the moment, it helps keep them up and converts all the boons that enemies have. So not extremely useful in PvE, but very useful in PvP. Well of Suffering is useful in both because it's straight up damage dealing. Target pulses for 6 seconds, so it's 6 times, and it gives out 2 stacks of vulnerability every time it pulses, and then deals 3,318 damage with my particular stat lines right now. That's a lot of damage, and they'll take a little bit more damage every time, every pulse, because they'll have 2 more stacks of vulnerability, so that's 2% more damage, 1% for every stack. So again, this is all about battlefield control, and being able to zone certain pieces of the battlefield out, make them very detrimental to either other players, or stack them in wherever all the mobs are in that PvE situation. It's very useful for dungeons, because you can drop it and end up dealing damage without having to be right there. The elite skill is Lich Form, mostly because it gives you stability. It has decent skills. The one skill for Lich Form can hit like an absolute truck, especially when it crits. And your lifesteal attributes still work in Lich Form, which is really nice. The heal skill we take, however, is not a well. You can switch it out for a well. That's not really a problem, but the reason I use Consume Conditions is because, again, I play a lot of PvP, and when you're in a fight and you have Well of Power and Consume Conditions up, what this allows you to do is use Consume Conditions to get rid of all the conditions you have that are currently killing you, and save that Well of Power for when you're truly disabled and you need to get out of there now. So it'll consume every condition that's on you, which is ridiculous, because you could have 6 to 7 conditions, and then use Consume Conditions, and they're all gone, and you were just healed for almost 10,000 health. Absolutely ridiculous. I much prefer Consume Conditions, and even with the Mordremoth stuff, it's you can end up with 4 or 5 conditions on you, but you don't want to use your stun break quite yet. That's why I carry Consume Conditions. I would be more inclined to use Well of Blood if it were a stun breaker. If it was a stun breaker, I wouldn't have a problem, because then even if I used Well of Power, I'd still have a stun break. But currently that isn't the case, so I use Consume Conditions. Weapon skill wise, we have a dagger. The one on the dagger generates a fair amount of life force. It's pretty quick. It has a relatively quick attack speed, so it's always good for trying to get those crits, and just your sustainability comes from hitting lots of people very quickly all the time. Your 2 skill, Life Siphon, don't waste this when you're full health. Don't engage with this. You should almost always engage with Axe, because that's your big damage dealer. Dark Pact, PvE, not quite as useful. It can be if you're kiting around a boss, but that's it. Some of the bosses, it won't even matter because they can't be immobilized. But in PvP, it's fantastic for chase downs, or preventing someone from getting to a capture point before you do. Whale of Doom. Whale of Doom hits 5 targets in front of you in a cone shape, and it dazes for 3 seconds. Now, daze doesn't prevent them from moving around. However, it does prevent them from casting any skills for 3 seconds, so it's a great stall tactic, especially if you're trying to bunker a point in PvP, or it's really nice in PvE if there's that huge wind-up, it's been telegraphed that this minion's going to do something very large, and someone's downed in front of them, they've been disabled in front of them. You can use Whale of Doom to cancel that mob out of that particular skill, and save your ally. Locust Swarm. One of my favorite skills is a Necro. It gives us swiftness, and it cripples anything it hits, and it's an AoE around us. Now, because we took the Banshee's Whale trait, normally this only has 10 impacts and only lasts for 10 seconds, but because we did, it gives us 50% more, so we end up with 15 seconds and 15 impacts. Now, it gives us a life force per hit, but the fact that it does hit is what we're really after. The damage is pretty minimal. However, when you pair that with your vampiric traits and your vampiric precision, with this skill on, so if you're your Locust Swarm is on and you're inside of a well of suffering and you're fighting someone, you're doing grotesque amounts of damage. And the fact that you've crippled them inside of your well, if they are out of stamina to dodge, they're stuck in that well until they hobble out of it. And it does a lot of damage. It hits pretty hard. In addition, it can be used to get around the battlefield, PvE or PvP as well. Its cooldowns are relatively low since we took the Banshee's Wail and reduced the cooldown by 20%. So, you know, if you just respawn and you need to get somewhere quick, it's a great way to do that. For the weapon switching, sorry, we have Axe. Rending Claws is a pretty quick attack. Not quite as quick as the dagger. However, it does apply vulnerability. Vulnerability is pretty nice. It increases the damage that you do a % per stack of vulnerability. Again, we're not too worried about sitting there spamming a bunch of moves with this particular build. You want to kind of be rotating between your two weapon sets and making sure your wells are down. Ghastly Claws is the big damage dealer for weapon skills in this particular build. It hits 8 times and does roughly 2,000 damage per hit. Now, of course, that's before armor reduction, but the life force is also really nice. We don't focus a whole lot on using your Death Shroud in this particular build. However, it's a great second HP bar. Essentially, it makes you very, very tanky. And sorry, a little fuzzy today. Unholy Feast. Cripple nearby foes and remove a boon. And then you gain retaliation. This is another fantastic skill for this build because even if you're locked down, you know, you just switch weapons, you lay down a well of suffering, someone's in it, you can Unholy Feast inside of it and it will still cripple them. So you always have a way to keep them in your well. The damage is okay, it's not great. What we're really after though is that cripple and then the retaliation. So you get a stack of retaliation, so 3 seconds of retaliation for every target you hit up to 5 targets. So 15 seconds of retaliation. And retaliation, the damage it does is based upon your power. Which means the higher your power, the more damage retaliation will do, which in our case, since this is a power well build, it works very well. When you're being teamed up on, you're outnumbered, Unholy Feast will make those fights last that much longer. So once you pop Unholy Feast, you can switch into more of a defensive rotation. Because every time they hit you, they're going to be taking damage. That's it for skills. For gear, there's a couple of different options that we can take a look at. The way I run it seems very strange to most people. And it's a little weird in a way. I took half Knights and half Valkyrie gear. Because again, the goal for this build was to be really tanky and to be able to take a pretty significant beating and really bunker down. So the Knight's gear gives us power, precision, and toughness. And then the Valkyrie gear gives us power, vitality, and ferocity. So critical chance, and then the amount of damage that we do when we do critical hit is increased by ferocity. So it's not quite a Berserker's build, but the critical hits do need to happen, which is why we try to keep Locust Swarm up and try to hit as many people as possible, as much as possible. The runes I have on here, because I wanted to be really, really tanky, it does nothing for damage. So you could actually get more damage out of this if you wanted by changing out this rune. But I use the Superior Rune of Doilag, and it's just toughness and vitality, and then you get passive health regen, which is pretty phenomenal considering that you're getting health every time you're hitting, every time you're critting, with your 2 skill and your dagger, and then this means you have passive in combat health regen, which makes you really hard to kill. Even if they do manage to get a condition on you and none of your condition removal is up, it's still going to be a really taxing thing to kill you because you're going to have that health regen. Weapon-wise, again, main hand is Axe and Warhorn. Offhand, like weapon swapping, is Dagger and Warhorn. And I do actually have 2 separate Warhorns here because of the sigils. So the important sigils are Superior Sigil of Accuracy, 7% increased critical chance, and the Superior Sigil of Intelligence. After you swap to that weapon, your next 3 attacks have 100% critical hit chance, which also means that they siphon health, which is really nice. Your Warhorn sigils, I've been experimenting with a couple your primary sigils on like your primary axe and your secondary Warhorn, you can kind of mess with. I've been doing a couple experiments. For your main hand though, I would highly suggest the Sigil of Battle. You'll get 2 stacks of might whenever you switch back to your axe, which can't hurt anything that's more damage. So that's it for gear. Like everything is, every other piece of gear is, you know, Knights or Valkyrie, and I've combined those 2. And the stat set is really nice. It's a really tanky build that works really well for PvP and really hunkering down. It's also been really nice for kind of solo leveling and solo content, because you are very hard to kill and it's very easy to manage a large amount of mobs with your wells. So that is it for this video. That is gears and traits for the Necro Power Well build that I've been running. Next video should be some rotations and some of the combos that can occur with this particular build, and show you a little bit of PvP footage for this build. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Open up here. Here's your Drake's Breath. Some AoE on there. We're going to Burning Speed. We're going to Ring of Fire. We're going to Earth. We're going to Earthquake. We're going to Magnetic Leap. We're going to Water, and we're going to Frozen Blast. Just like that. So you can get quite the amount of stacks off that rotation, because as soon as we hit this, our fire was up again, which means we can rotate back to